Earlier this year, before a lot of this shit went south, I made a video talking about, it mostly had to do with things regarding availability with the Valve Index at the time before the COVID lockdown stuff, the massive hype for Half-Life Alyx at the time, and the very obvious signs of wear that my Oculus Rift CV1 was having. After that video, I got a lot of my inner gripes out with the VR industry at the time I was having, and I didn't think it would be warranted to make a new video based on the subject until enough information or news has been out. And now, that was, again, back in February. It's now October somehow, and a lot of substantial news has come out since then. Mostly within the past few months, if I'm gonna be honest, so I figured bring it up in a similar format as that older video. And due to several real-life circumstance changes, unfortunately you're gonna have to miss out on the grade A acting from that video too.
Oh, no, you took the 20. Show me the cable.
Oh, I took the money first.
My sincerest apologies, but I don't expect the video to be too long to begin with. Most of the information I'm going to be talking about here is relatively easy to find with a few Google searches, so it's not like I'm doing much work here, but I'm at least putting it out into a package where at least you're familiar with buying an Oculus product. Some specific pieces of information I feel like are not getting talked about broadly, so it's not rocket science. All the sources will be in the description and all that stuff, but I want to be clear, a lot of this stuff I'm going to be talking about, I'm also probably going to be adding a little bit of my own personal opinions on saying things. Some of it may not even matter to you, some of it you won't even think about, but there's concerns that I have with the industry, with the company as a whole. I felt like this could potentially cause some stir. If it doesn't matter to you, don't worry about it. You don't have to think about that particular thing, but I just wanted to bring some things into larger view and my own take on things, I guess. I just wanted to mention it all beforehand as context. But anyways, without further ado, let's jump into the actual news that we're talking about here. Oculus, the arguably biggest company in the VR space these days, is kind of changing the past few months. For better or worse is to be completely seen. However, the biggest changes as of lately were absolutely tremendous. Oculus, starting in October of 2020, will now require new users on the Oculus platform to log into the platform via a Facebook account. I feel like I shouldn't have to say much past that to really express as why that's a bad thing, but I want to get into specifics to express exactly, one, why Oculus is doing this in the first place now after how many years the company's been running under this current program, and number two, why this affects customers like you and me. So in order to make sure that we're all up to date here and exactly what the company's history is, I'm just going to very brief recap of what exactly we're dealing with. Oculus was acquired by Facebook in 2014 for approximately $2 billion. Originally, Oculus was a small company that was backed by a couple big tech industry heads like Palmer Luckey and Brendan 𝐈𝐒. I don't know Brendan 𝐈𝐒 that much. He seems to be an investor or something, but Palmer Luckey is a name that rings the bells in a few people. Not as much me, but anyway. They actually kickstarted their initial version of their mainline headset, but it was mostly just a proof of concept at the time. The main purpose of that Kickstarter was to get the company their foot in the door, get financials going, and get the research for the future of VR at the time going at that point. Since then, the Kickstarter blew up. The company continued to research into what VR means, how best it works and everything. And more as time progressed, other companies like Valve talked to Oculus at one point, and there's a bunch of different stuff they did and talked about and stuff. Just go watch something else for them. But essentially they were making a name for themselves within a short period of time. So that's why when the acquisition was announced from Facebook that they had acquired Oculus back in 2014, that was a big deal. It wasn't an absolutely massive surprise that the company got acquired by another company. That sort of was expected to an extent. But what wasn't expected was it to be Facebook. At the time, Facebook wasn't as known for pushing the tech industry. It was just a social media service. So whenever it was announced that Facebook acquired Oculus back in 2014, a lot of people, myself included, were fairly disappointed with how all that happened. Back in 2014, they weren't necessarily as well known as a giant tech vulture on information, but for people who are concerned with privacy and stuff like that, this sort of stuff wasn't news. So for people like me, that was really worrying whenever it was announced that was the case. Now, I won't get into specifics exactly why Facebook is known that way or whatever that nonsense is. There's a lot better videos and documentaries and all this other stuff that explains that history better than I could. But just keep in mind that Facebook isn't mostly well known for privacy and keeping things relatively safe in that respect. So, ever since 2014, Oculus has always been under the thumb of Facebook. This really isn't new in 2020 that Facebook has acquired Oculus. What does this matter? What matters is, up until this point, Oculus hasn't required any sort of Facebook integration to use its services before. Whether it be the Rift S, or the original Rift, or the Quest, none of it required a Facebook account before. So whenever there was an announcement that there was going to be a requirement in the future, a lot of people didn't like it. Oculus, by and large, for a long time, was essentially treated as its own company, just happened to be paid by Facebook too. The Oculus brand itself was mostly separate from Facebook. The key part is you didn't have to join Facebook in order to enjoy the Oculus products, which were also funded by Facebook. Now, the introduction of Facebook requiring Facebook login on Oculus products changes that completely. On August 18th, we got a blog update describing these new changes that are coming. Starting October 2020, everyone using Oculus devices in the future that are logging into new accounts will be required to use a Facebook account. Existing users on the Oculus platform can merge their Oculus account with an already existing Facebook account. Those who don't merge their Oculus account will be able to continue to enjoy their Oculus products just fine, their Oculus account, whatever, natively until January of 2023. And all future released Oculus devices will now require a Facebook login once you start it up. So in essence, if you want to continue to use an Oculus product, you're going to have to use a Facebook account. That already entails a certain personal set of information that gets tossed around between a bunch of different companies and stuff anyway. But now we're adding on Oculus as well. Eventually you're just not going to have a choice in the matter, despite promises made by the founder years ago. Those reservations I believe most people should hold anyway are now shattered completely in spectacular fashion for everybody to see. There's no real way around it anymore, really. Facebook is totally changing and taking over the company Oculus from this point forward. Don't quite believe me yet? Alright, let's go over some specific news that are also related to that. On August 25th, we received word from Facebook's tech blog they're going to be making a new research division within the company called Facebook Reality Labs, which is going to be encompassed by the same people who worked on research for the Oculus headsets and stuff back at the Oculus company. Essentially transferring over that research division over to Facebook with a different name. This can mean either one of two things. It can either be a name change, and that's it, or it could also mean number two, where Facebook will have more actual means of access towards the R&D team for future virtual reality and augmented reality products. Granted, I can't speak on behalf of Facebook and Oculus's internals, operations and stuff. It's all just far beyond my comprehension at this point. But in all honesty, as someone who wants to see the VR industry grow, flourish, it makes me lean more towards the latter of what I just said than the former. Partly because of the fact that they also announced the Facebook Connect event in that same announcement. Now, what is the Facebook Connect announcement? Previously known as the Oculus Quest event, Oculus held an event, this little presentation showing off new hardware and games and stuff yearly. They rebranded it to Facebook Connect, so it's no longer attached to the Oculus company itself. It got rebranded along with that research division to be more in line with Facebook's branding. We're not at a major deal so far, but what exactly came out of this recent Facebook Connect event? First and foremost, they announced the Oculus Quest 2. Starts at $299 with 64 gig model, 256 gig model for $399. Improved screen and integrated Oculus Link support, and it also requires Facebook login. Number 2, the Oculus Rift S is going to be retired next year. Number 3, Facebook is now making smart glasses with Ray-Ban. Number 4, Facebook is now working on an augmented reality system. Think Microsoft mixed reality when it was originally announced back in 2013 or something, whenever you got the guy playing with Minecraft in real space or whatever. Think that, but with Facebook instead. And they also had various game announcements and stuff, but the majority of that was just, here's a picture of this project we're working on at this company. Most notably, Splinter Cell's making a game. I don't know. Haven't seen it yet. So yeah, we got the next Quest headset coming out. I mean, it generally looks kind of cool, but I'm surprised at the pricing of it. But I think it's really important for the pricing to be low for the company, because what happens is Oculus is being shown as the more favorable option to a lot of people because it's cheaper. VR is not a cheap hobby. So the headset will work natively with the Oculus Link, which the Oculus Link is a special cable that connects to the headset to your computer, so you can play your VR games like that. It'll work natively like that, and I think it's been in beta for the Quest, the original Quest, for a while, but this is going to be the next push of it. So it can technically be tethered to a PC and played the old-fashioned way, but the Oculus Quest 2 inherently is designed around being a standalone experience. You don't have to have a computer, which, granted, that's good for most people, but a lot of people can't play some of the games in the Oculus Store because it's only one store. There's a lot more games on Steam. You know. Now, granted, when you're talking about the low price of $299, and you're adding, if you want that functionality for PC, you have to add on that link cable, which that is in itself $80. So you're going to be hitting just under the margin of the Rift S, which is already a inside-out tracking plugged directly in the computer headset. You're going to be missing out on that. But granted, you're also getting the better screen and some other things. I don't know. The product isn't out yet. It's not out, so we have no idea. But you're going to be tackling the same Rift S territory anyway. It's got very similar feature set and stuff. It's just cheaper with the option to connect to a computer. But more importantly, what else is involved with the Rift? Well, it's hard to say. The headset seems to be it's going to be supported software-wise for the coming future. It's hard to tell exactly how long that support's going to be. The physical product, the actual hardware itself, is going to be completely phased out come January 2021. Whether this is the old school retail way of trying to get all these products out the door for as cheap as possible, clear inventory space, that sort of thing, I don't know. Officially, by Oculus the company, they're not going to be selling these headsets anymore come 2021. Now, this should already have red flags of its own, just generating as I'm talking about it, but I want to bring up some of my own concerns regarding the product and the future of the product and stuff. That should sound really familiar if you watched the previous video about this. First, let's get this one out of the way. Number one, what is the warranty support going to look like after 2021 hits? Is it going to be the same proper support as it should be for that next year or so, whatever the original warranty's length is? What about after those warranties go out? What exactly does that entail? And number two, as far as keeping the products lasting over the years, what is the replacement part situation going to be like? How are we going to keep these things going and running and working perfectly fine, not just in a sense of saving money, but also in a sense of we're throwing away super expensive equipment that is next to perfectly fine aside from one or two parts. What happens after this point? Will we still have access to be able to buy these replacement headset cable for the Rift S? I don't know. Now, the reason I ask these questions is because I already had to deal with this shit earlier this year. I had the Oculus Rift CB1. I was stuck with a cable that was beaten to hell, and it didn't work anymore. And I couldn't officially replace it without going through some shady vendor, somebody else reselling a cable for an exuberant price or whatever. The thing could hardly connect to my computer at that point by the time I stopped using it. And despite me trying to search for a replacement cable, there was quite literally no replacement parts to be found anywhere on sale officially. And arguably, the cable's the most important part of the headset when you're dealing with a desktop VR experience. Not this standalone stuff the Quest does. When you're dealing with a computer running the games and pumping that information into a headset, the best way to get that information is via cable. What happens when the cable's out? You can't play. That's it. The rest of the headset, perfectly fine, works great. Can't use it because of this one cable that you can't replace. So back earlier in February, for me at the time, it was either buy the Rift S from Oculus or saddle up for the next big thing, which was significantly more expensive than the Rift S. And at the time, I bit the bullet. I got the Index instead! I love the thing to death so far. It's had so few hiccups compared to my old Rift. But in a reasonable stance, I still shouldn't have bought this over a simple cable to fix an already working piece of equipment. This is fantastic. But it's expensive. It's expensive, man. I don't regret it, but it's a lot of money. Alright, so that's most of the big news that I wanted to cover in this video. Alright, let's take the hair up. We're gonna get real. Holy shit. Now I'm gonna talk more about how this should directly relate to customers for future VR products. What matters in all of this information to people like you and me? First off, the changes with the research division and the rebranding of the Connect event and stuff, it should all portray concerns regarding the privacy of information now more than ever. When you're dealing with virtual reality stuff, you're not dealing with simple plug-and-play mechanics. There's complicated AI algorithms being pumped into these setups to predict exactly where your hands are in physical space, and your head, and how tall you are, your arm span, your pupillary distance for keeping things clear when you're looking through the headset. There's a lot of information that goes pumping into these headsets. A lot of things happen. It's what allows all of this to work. All this to work as well as it does at this current point. But let's continue to keep in mind, we're now dealing with information that is physically attributed to your body, that is unalterable and you cannot really anonymize. Some games even ask for your weight if you're looking for like more of a fitness game like Box VR or something. There's a lot of information that goes into these products. And we're now letting Facebook continue to be trusted in this regard just because they own Oculus. And this is information that you can't just take away from VR. You can't. It's built into the core product. When you're adding these things on top of the fact that it's now brought on with Facebook, which has already had scandal after scandal of all these things, and there's all this political stuff that they've been through, and there's all this other... It's crazy what that company's put up with. We're now allowing that to continue to handle this information. Some people, I feel like it shouldn't be the case. Oculus/Facebook has even said before that they're not going to be putting things like advertisements and stuff like that into the VR space. But they always say it at this time. They never say never. They're never doing it. Possibly because you're dealing with the founder saying we're never going to allow Facebook logins. You know, you don't have to have Facebook in order to use this. That's completely stripped away. Maybe they're not trying not to do that again. Part of me is just like keeping the door open though for the future. But you're going to be pumping this information into the Oculus platform, which is owned by Facebook. They say these things don't get tracked and whatever. It's hard to tell. It could be completely encrypted for all that I know. I don't know. It's stuff that you should be concerned with and watch. There's little doubt in my mind that it would eventually switch around either. Just keep it in mind whenever you're buying a VR product in the future. Granted, this could also go along with any other company. It could go in Valve's favor too. It could go in HTC's favor. It could be whatever. But Oculus, because it's attached to Facebook, I think is more concerning in that regard. Number two, pre-existing Oculus users are now having to contemplate sticking around with Oculus products or moving on to another platform. Again, come 2023, all Oculus account support will be completely phased out. What extent this actually means is to be exactly determined, but according to that Oculus blog post, it should still mean the functionality of the games is 99% still there. It's just anything socially related. That's all going to be completely unusable. And this also goes to the point where if a game is older, hasn't been updated in quite some time by this point in 2023 to support these Facebook accounts, we don't know if this is going to just inherently work regardless. The games might have to be updated to work in this new framework by the developers, and some developers are probably not going to be able to do that. So come 2023, in 3 years, people are going to be dealing with less than functional VR headsets. Who knows? Maybe, just for the clarification, it may just work perfectly fine. You may not even need it. You might, because I don't even, like me personally, I don't even play Oculus games. Even when I use my Oculus headset, I just played VR games on Steam. That's it. All the games that I wanted off of Steam, or off of VR, 99% of them were on Steam. So it's like, it might not even matter, but keep that in mind. And number three, just to nail this down, what's the deal with longevity? Listen, planned obsolescence is really nothing new, but it adds a whole new layer when you're adding onto this expensive toy like a Rift S or a Quest that can work perfectly functionally fine, but have one measly part not working, like, in fact, a cable. In my eyes, there's really no excuses to not be able to buy these products down the line, I understand, you know, we're dealing with older hardware. It's not like I'm not unfazed by that, but this stuff is just very expensive. And the track record for Oculus as a company doing this, completely out the window. We'll see how it does with the Rift S. Seems like they were a lot more supportive with that product than the original Rift, believe it or not. But again, with my old Rift, it didn't happen. I couldn't buy a cable from them. I needed to go off of eBay. And I didn't want to buy that, you know, $120 cable off of eBay. I just don't think that will end well. And that we're not even getting into the whole economical sense of, again, throwing out these perfectly good tech pieces of equipment that could be reused, just completely out the window. In the end, though, I don't know. I'm just going to be sticking away from Oculus products probably for a long time. Like I said, if these sorts of things don't really bother you in the slightest, don't even worry about it. I still stand by the fact that Oculus products are the best VR value for the money these days. Especially when you consider, you know, every other option, and like second-hand HTC Vives is about the same price range as a brand new Quest 2. So it's not like it's absurd to go with an Oculus product. It's just more or less what you personally value. I'm very much a privacy-oriented person. I'm very much private, secure of information and stuff like that. So when you're dealing with Facebook and stuff like that, you're starting to open this Pandora's box of like, well, what are they tracking? What aren't they tracking? We don't know. And all this other nonsense that comes with it, like advertising and stuff. It's a lot to consider, and I think people should be having more educated takes on this. So again, me personally, I just don't trust big tech companies like this. But fuck it though, bro. It's your life. It's really hard to deny why they're appealing. In this particular sense, Steam VR headsets, like the HTC Vive or anything like that, they use the same trackers and stuff. If a tracker dies or if a controller goes out or something like that, they're a lot more easily replaceable. You don't have to go with a very specific model number, or like if my Valve Index, if this headset ever goes kaput within the next couple years, I don't have to replace this entire setup in my room. I just have to replace the headset, and that's it. Maybe a new cable, that sort of thing. That's sort of the idea behind it, and that's why I went with the Index. You don't have to just buy one specific part that isn't in stock anywhere. You just replace it with something that's the next step up for that particular thing. Old HTC Vives can get these new trackers for the Index, and they work perfectly fine. And same with the Index, you can just, if you got an HTC Vive already and don't want to get rid of everything, just buy the new headset or buy the new controllers. That's all you gotta do. Now granted, the Vive Index controllers are almost the same as the Quest 2, so you're dealing more expensive stuff. It's just, I don't know, I'd like it more. But yeah, if you're interested to buy a VR headset of some sort, it's definitely worth doing the research in these things. The VR market is very all over the place, and it takes a lot of learning sometimes to make sure you know what you're getting into. It's important to really know where your money goes too. You could save a lot of money by going with an Oculus product, but you're also, in doing so, sharing your information that's being sold off to other companies. Or you can go with a Valve product, which does probably less than that, but costs a significant chunk more of your money. I can't answer that for you. I'm sorry. I feel like there's less and less discussion about these sorts of things in a very grandiose way. Partly because I think most of it's boring. Most people won't care, but I care. Fuck it, I care. This has been a very bleak video. But yeah, I think it's a good time to go to bed. I'm gonna look like a fucking tool recording this. There's no good spot in my car to even put this shit. This is really going swimmingly. I got fucking lazy. I can't believe I gotta sit here and talk more about this shit, but here I am. I'm in a fucking public park right now, so I don't feel like sitting in my car for 30 minutes talking to myself over fucking
Oculus Rift and shit, but Jesus Christ. So, funny enough, there's even more news. Every time I'm about to like, all right, let's wrap up the edit, let's get this shit out the door, there's more stuff. And I just kept debating on like saving it and saving it and saving it and saving it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, fuck it. Oh, I have even more. There we go. Now you can see me even better. All right, so this is the part where I'm going to start dropping my own opinions more often, because of the fact that we've reached the point where Facebook is now controlling shit off the wazoo. Within the past week, it's now the 16th of October. The Quest 2 launched 3 days ago. It launched the 13th. I thought I would get the video out by that point at the very latest. After that point though, I was like, by the time the 13th came around, and like, I was like, that's cool, it came out, you know, maybe. I haven't seen any reviews. Personally, I haven't seen that many reviews on the game, on the thing. I have hardly looked into it after, you know, the specs and stuff like that. I figured it'd be mostly just an Oculus Quest, but better, you know, improved aside from the Facebook thing. But here I am 3 days after it came out, and I'm like kind of blown away at how this is all being handled and how little it's worse than I thought it would be. You know, I initially, like, whenever I'm hearing the news about Facebook integration and shit into the Oculus platform, I'm thinking red flags along the lines of, all right, there's privacy concerns because Facebook is now getting more of their hands into the Oculus company, and, you know, taking more of the information from its users to sell that towards third parties. I won't get into a lot of this stuff because a lot of it, to be honest, most of it I find just depressing, and I don't like to talk about it that much. But when you get into like politics, and you got the T-Man, you got the T-Man in the news all the time, and he's doing all this shit all the time. You got the T-Man talking about fake news and all this other stuff, which again, I won't get into specifics. You will have to find that out yourself. But there's that stuff where it's like, I think most of us are at least a little bit aware of the fact that, like, you're talking about like adding things like fake news and all this stuff, and like you're now we're starting to question the credibility of journalism in a sense, you know, certain journalistic outlets and stuff like that, which is good in my opinion. Accountability and stuff like that, more accountability and whatever in the world is great. Now we're injecting that into it's now related to the Oculus Quest. Because Facebook, within the past couple weeks, well, first off, for the past few months, they've also been heavily injecting this new method of like authenticating its news sources and, you know, information out there and stuff like that, which to an extent I'm all for, but I don't think Facebook should be doing that. I don't think Facebook should have any, Facebook, Twitter, all these big platforms should not have direct meddling in that sort of thing, in my personal views. That should be left to somewhere, you know, third party. And I guess you can technically say that there's third party sources that Facebook and Twitter or whatever uses to, you know, authenticate this stuff. But more often than not, like if you look in a lot of these cases where they, you know, quote unquote fact check things, they're 99% of the time next to nothing to do with the companies that they're saying are citing these sources and, you know, looking into this information. They're not doing that at all. So you have a company like Facebook. I can't really prove it. This is all mostly hearsay at this point. But I don't believe they're getting these third parties to look into these sources and fact check things. Me personally, I think Facebook's doing it themselves. Again, up to personal debate. I don't give a shit. But we're now, in my personal view, when that's the fact, we're dealing with that. Now we're having this company that's also helming one of the biggest VR markets there is right now. We got that going on. And in order to use this new product that has absolutely nothing to do with anything related to politics or journalism or anything like that, if one person is spouting nonsense that, granted, there's a bunch of nonsense out there, but if they're spouting nonsense, they paid for this product from Oculus, and they try to log in using their Facebook account, which is now required, and their Facebook account is now locked down because they're locking down accounts that they think are spouting nonsense or full of shit. We are now dealing with a bunch of people that can't use these products. So now we are dealing with a lot of people, and granted, some people are locked out of Facebook accounts. You're technically not allowed to have two Facebook accounts either, because they want to centralize all that information in one account, right? So some people have to make a secondary Facebook account in order to use this, because either they lost an old account, or maybe they don't even have one. Maybe they had one years ago and they're locked out of it or whatever. So now we're dealing with this aftershock of how many users, I'm not 100% sure, but there's a lot of people out there that are unable to use these devices. in a very real sense, not allowed to use these new devices simply because of the fact that their Facebook account either does not work or they're deemed inappropriate in some sense or anything like that. Like, again, I'm trying to get as broad in a sense as possible here, and I don't give a shit if you agree or disagree in some of these aspects, but if you pay for a product and somebody over at Facebook decides that they don't agree with your certain political beliefs or something, they can instantly lock you out of that account right now, and in a sense also lock you out of this Oculus platform. That's big. That's major. This is no longer just data collection. This is now controlling access to the platform itself through means that are, to an extent, arbitrary, to an extent completely unsubstantiated, completely unrelated to virtual reality. For people who want to fucking put on a headset that has fucking pair of goggles on it that shows you a fucking screen that looks 3D. You can no longer use that in some instances because your Facebook account is now locked out of. That Facebook is now deemed that you are an inappropriate person or have inappropriate beliefs that are incorrect. Again, the majority of people, I don't know if this will directly relate to. I'm pretty sure most people won't ever be afflicted by this, if I'm going to be 100% honest. But the fact that it's even possible disgusts me. The fact that it's even out there, that I have to sit here and talk about something like this even happening in the first place, I find repugnant. I find bullshit. Like, who the fuck at Facebook decided to sit down and say, this is how it's going to happen, and now we're going to do this on Oculus too? Because this Oculus merge, this is not just merging Facebook accounts. This is merging Facebook terms of service. It's merging any sort of privacy-related issues that are like all the baggage that you get from a Facebook account or anything related to a Facebook account is now being thrown onto the Oculus platform. And Oculus has its own set of restrictions as well that are already in place due to the fact of its nature. So it's like we're adding on to this, all this extra bullshit onto this fucking video game platform. It's so stupid. It's so fucking stupid. I can't believe I gotta sit here and fucking rant about this in my own goddamn car in the middle of a fucking park. I feel like a fucking lunatic. And again, like, if you take into consideration how few people actually like buying VR stuff these days and all that stuff. Now, granted, that market's been growing because of the fucking quarantine and shit. Like, we're all stuck in the fucking house. But it's absurd how much shit is going on here. It's absurd. And it's really depressing on my own end. It's really depressing on my own end because I invest into these things that I enjoy. I enjoy these products. I enjoy this technology. I enjoy all this shit. But it's hard for me to suggest to people that, hey, Oculus stuff, it's cheap as hell. When you're talking about VR, you're talking about saving a good $500. Yeah, buy that shit. It's cheap as fuck. It works great. You know what I mean? But it's attached to this company doing this shit. I'm like, why the fuck would I now? I was just 5 seconds ago going like, you know, I still stand by the fact that these products are full of value and stuff like that when you take into consideration those things, but I still do. Don't get me wrong. I'm still on that book. But why the fuck would I recommend it to people now? Now, like, unless they already have a Facebook account that they have access to, don't use at all, and almost never use social media anymore. All these big fucking companies are now deeming what's appropriate and what's not, what's okay to talk about, what's not. It's such a load of shit, and now we have to deal with that in fucking VR. I gotta deal with that shit in day-to-day life. I'm going on there to fucking have some fun. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have to worry about that. I shouldn't have to worry about fucking not being allowed to get on there. That's so fucking stupid. If you want to learn more information about this sort of shit, if you want to, like, honest to God, more up-to-date news and stuff like this on the general sense, honestly, I hate Reddit, but the best place to check this sort of shit is Reddit. That's only because the subreddits for, like, virtual reality and Oculus, Valve Index, you know, that sort of thing, there's specific subreddits that do talk about this sort of stuff in a very extensive way. If you want more information about this, if you want to see actual people getting locked out of their accounts and complaining about it, go to those places. Specifically, in this case, the Oculus Quest subreddit has multiple people complaining that they're locked out of their Facebook account, that they cannot play with this fucking new device that they bought. To what extent this even goes, like, are you going to get locked out of your digital goods now? So are we at this point where it's like, all right, I bought, these, hundreds of dollars of games, some people, in some cases, hundreds of dollars worth of games for the Oculus platform to download and play, and now that I said one mean word to somebody online, I am now reprimanded in a sense and completely locked out of my fucking account. That doesn't sit well with me. I'm gonna go fucking walk around and blow some steam. I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.